Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sergeant's Talk TV. This is Big Mike.
It's Jason. Welcome back, y'all.
Yeah. Hey,
Man.
tonight we're going to talk about military occupational specialties in the military. Okay. If you are broke as a joke and you can't find a job, the military's got a job for you. Okay. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about our experiences when we transitioned from boot camp and basic training into the education phase of our MOSs. Okay. So first of all, we want to say hello to everybody in the chat. There's Glenn and Shannon Salty Life.
I had to pop that one up there. So yeah, seeing that our friend there, Jerry Butler Family Farms, made it in.
Yep. United States Navy. Wandering Gypsy, what? Vanner? Is that Randall? No.
No.
Well, he's Gypsy Trails, isn't he?
He's Gypsy Trails.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's traveling. I actually meant to message him today because he called me. He should be close to our area in a week or so, maybe.
Yeah. Hey, if you're military, if you're former military or current military, hey, put down your MOS. Not just the number series, but put in what you did in the military for us.
Yeah, because every branch, the numbers mean something different. So
yeah. All right, there's Cindy Brown, downtown Cindy Brown. Hello, hello.
We got Peter at Old Man King Homestead. Hello.
There is Glenda. Hello. Lumpy Burke's in here.
I see Dawn from Hat Creek Homestead made it in.
My favorite female Marine. All right, Peter's here. Debbie Droff, hello, hello. There's Lila. She's go Navy. There she is.
There we go. Southern Blessed. He's here to laugh at us.
Hey, Chair Force is in the house.
Glad he could represent.
Yeah. Hey,
and
there's Miss MT Homestead. I know that's her because I ain't on there.
We got there's old Anson. They're still on vacay.
Yep, he's Navy. His wife also.
Right.
Both
Anson
of them
and Gladys both Navy.
There's Rainy Ridge.
We got Ricky Smith from Veterans Landing.
All right. Tish Ross is in here. No judgment here with Tish Ross. She'd be a great counselor in the military. You know, when you start talking to Tish, I mean,
and they let it all out, and
you, on the Tish Crying Network, PCN, she just makes you open up for some reason, and that's what soldiers need to do when they get.
But the problem would end up being is the soldiers and the Marines are like the service members need that therapy. They need to let it out and vent. The problem is she'd be under so much tape that it would make all the units non-mission capable because they would have anybody, like all of their service members would be non-deployable due to, emotional issues and stuff.
Yeah, they'd be sitting over in a corner crying and what are you crying for? I talked to Dr. Tish. Hey, Jenny Lipsky. Webb's in here.
We got Daniel Kearney, Air Force retired, secure communications.
Greg and Gina. Hello, hello.
So Wandering Gypsy Vanner says, no, I'm Kathy, used to be a nomad, 63 Bravo Army, power generator, wheel vehicle mechanic.
There you go. All right. Lumpy Burke was in the Navy. He was aviation structural mechanic.
We got Neil S. was a CB.
All right.
Love those CBs on deployment for sure.
Daniel Kearney, U.S. Air Force retired, secure communications.
Glenn and Shannon Salty Life, 13 Fox, forward observer.
There you go. Those dudes, I'm going to tell you something. I thought I had a friend that was on a Colt team, and he was a forward observer, I believe, and they had to shoot the laser. They'd be out in the middle of humping it out in the middle of nowhere, calling for fire and putting the laser on the target. It was crazy.
Yeah, I did it a few times as, in training, never in a combat type situation, but in training just in case.
Yeah.
Because with my MOS, we were support. So once again, the Marine Corps always falls back that everybody's infantry. So,
Yeah.
what do they call it? Everybody's a rifleman. So you could always be provisional infantry. So.
Lila's up there, MOS specialist in the kitchen. We're going to call her Cookie from now on when she comes in.
That is an important lady right there.
It is. My roommate at one time, he was a baker in the Army. All he did all night, I never seen him because he worked all night baking stuff. Mm-hmm. He'd have the kitchen all by himself, and he was just baking bread, cakes, cook all that stuff for the soldiers. I never seen him because I'd be going to work when he was getting off shift.
I got attached to I had moved companies within my battalion. And when I did that, the battalion was already scheduled to go out to California for training for like a month.
Yeah.
But because I was in transit, even though I was in the same battalion, but because I was moving from one company to the next, I wasn't put on those rosters. I was what they call the RBE, remain behind element.
Right.
But part of that was they took all of our cooks from the chow hall on the training exercise. So a lot of us, especially us junior Marines, got sent over to, which I think I was a corporal then, but we got sent over to the chow hall and we had to work at the chow hall. And I'm like, man, really? But I tell you what, I've had 2 instances that I've had to work in the chow hall. I'm glad it wasn't my permanent MOS.
Yeah.
But the times I was there, it was like day on, day off. Like you would get up at like 4 a.m. so you could be there, or 3 a.m, whatever. Be there. You'd work like 2 shifts and then you get 2 shifts off. So it was day on, day off schedule. And of course, then you get the hookup because you're cooking everything. Like you're not just getting all the everyday, you get all the specialty like omelets, and it wasn't a bad gig to go as a temporary. I wouldn't want to have done it full time.
Yeah. Oh, Hat Creek says she's a 2651 Special Intelligence Communications. That means she was a smart person. She scored high on the ASVAB.
She used all them big words. She's the one that took the big words and made them into crayon pictures for us simpletons.
There's Jinky V. Hello. There's Misadventures. Wife of AA. Okay.
Adventure America. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So
Navy diver and hull technician, underwater welder. Dude, I have a friend. He got out of the Navy. He was an underwater welder. He went to work for the oil rig companies, and that guy made bank. And then I never heard from him again. Dude, it is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world.
The underwater welding
in the ocean and stuff like that. Dude, he died. Yeah, he died. I found out later on he died. And I go, holy crap. Big money, they said.
Yeah, one of our tank crewmen, he had worked for me for a little bit when he was transitioning out of the Marine Corps. And that's what he was when he got out of the Marine Corps, he kind of bounced around a little bit, but then he got locked in and he started looking at jobs, and underwater welding was one of them that he's like, man, they can make bank. And so he's like, so he went to school for it, did all this training, and come to find out it was like a really saturated job field at the time he was looking for a job. So he did the school, graduated, top of his class and stuff, did really well, but then couldn't get work. So he's not even doing it. He's I know he lives down in Florida somewhere now, and it's Florida or I think Florida. But he does like multi-million-dollar contracts for these huge company organizations of getting them new like roof systems on their businesses. And
Yeah.
but
There's Trish Marriott from the UK. All right. Welcome. And there's Drops. Hello, hello.
we got Ricky Smith says aviation hydraulic mechanic on the P3 aircraft.
Yeah. We got Wandering Gypsy Vanner, 101st Airborne, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That's where I went through Air Assault School. And then I was in a black hat over in Europe at the Black Horse Air Assault School, 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I was with the attack helicopter over there, 11th ACR. We had our own air assault school. Campbell used to come over and certify us every 2 years. So I had to go to be an instructor there. Even if you went to air assault school before, you had to go through that school before you could be a black hat.
Well,
I was Air Assault Candidate 3-1, and Air Assault Candidate 3-1 had to recite the lineage anytime a black hat told them to, because I was a senior non-commissioned officer going through, and I was going to be an instructor. And then you had to recite the names of every candidate Air Assault 3-1 that's gone through the course. Dude, by the time I graduated, I knew them all. I did a brain dump after that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've even had some conversation with guys now was after being out for however many years it's been now, I guess.
Adventure America was USMC, Cobra, and Huey sheet metal and hydraulics. There you go.
I wanted to go back. I pulled it up a minute ago right here. Southern Blessed aircraft mechanic, aerial port cargo crew chief, retired out of civil engineering, several MOSs throughout his 37 years of Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Thank you for your service. Good Lord. Karen Brest is in here. Let's see. Am I at the bottom? No. I am
dropped as I ran around with Philippine Marines. Got Brian, the Vineyard Farmhouse. He popped in.
Yeah.
There's Rachel at Back to Good.
All right.
Oh, right here, Lila. They fed 5,000 3 times a day, every day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to tell you something. I was at Colorado Springs, and I worked for MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. And we went over to the Air Force Academy, and they gave us a tour of their MWR program. Well, over there, the MWR program runs the chow hall, and they feed 6,000 cadets in 1 hour.
And wow,
they're in there and they're out of there. Just the way they do it, it's like they come in. There's no chow line. Okay, they put in their order, and you have to have your order in at a certain time, right? And you sit at the same table every single day, and you go inside this gigantic, like it's like 4 basketball. It's huge, this place where they eat, and they can actually do a graduation inside there too if they had to. But they bring out these mess workers. They bring out these big square boxes, tall square boxes, and they bring them out and they set them by the table. It's a warmer, and then when they get there, they open it up and they see their name on it, and they just get their tray and they start eating. It's crazy how they feed that many people 3 times a day.
Yeah. Well, and I know I don't think it was so much when I first came in. Maybe it was, but they had started converting a lot of our chow halls on the Marine Corps bases, where the Marines only did a few things really inside there. A lot of it would get run by civilians.
Yeah.
You know, they took over a lot of the on-base jobs that in the long run made sense, especially when there was such a high turnover with all the deployments and
Yeah.
you know, entire battalions leaving an installation. You lose a lot of them support personnel. So like all of our gate guards were civilians, chow hall was civilians, and then even some of the like maintenance jobs. I mean, of course, the base maintenance and facilities was all civilian ran, but like when I first came in, we could like tear an engine down to nothing and rebuild it up. Well, they
Right.
took that ability away where we could change a whole engine, but it was a civilian's job now because of contracts that they tore it apart, rebuilt the engine, and then gave us a whole engine back. So it's somewhat streamlined it, but it was kind of hard to see Marines kind of losing other jobs, but they needed them for deployment. So
Yeah. Hey, there's the tinker's wife.
oh, you were putting okay. I was like, wait, did I click on something? We got these ghosts going again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we're getting down there on the.
Oh, here you go. I worked on the A7E
Corsair.
Okay. And the Intruder. Okay.
Oh, Linyoki. How long have I been retired? Let's see. I retired in 2015. So whatever. What is that? 9 years now, I guess. I'm going on. This will be 9 years this year in August.
Yep. Hey, so we're going to get started, guys. The subject tonight is military occupational specialties. And just to kick it off, there are so many jobs in the military, and each branch has their own. And we're going to concentrate on the Marine Corps and the Army. In the Army, there are 160 different classifications of MOSs. And in the Marine Corps, there is 150 of them. And when you break it down, when I say 160 plus or 150 plus, within those MOSs, there are several MOSs within there. So let's just take, like me, I was a military policeman for my first half of my Army career. And inside there, you have the military policeman and you have corrections. The same thing is in the Marine Corps. They're both combined. You can work either or. And I've worked both of those. Corrections absolutely sucks. Because, you know, it's just the life itself. And then the discipline inside there is nothing like you see in a regular prison and stuff like that. I mean, it's like you have no free time to make friends and stuff like that. And you're lining up. It's like you're in boot camp every single day. And we made them go out and do PT every day too, when they're in prison and stuff. They didn't get like their own private gym and all that kind of stuff. They just lived in there. But the one prison that is used both by the feds and the military now is Leavenworth. The old prison in Leavenworth is where I worked. I also worked in Mannheim at the correctional facility on Coleman Barracks. But the one now that they have, if you go to Fort Leavenworth, it's this big prison. It looks like it's made out of like a smoke-colored rocks, and it's just it's a huge building, the prison there. But you can go there for if you've been tried and confined from a federal court, or you can be there in the military also. But I did that, and also inside there is you've got identifiers within the MOS, like you can go CID, you can go MPI. So when I was in there, I had a Victor 5 identifier, which made you could work military police investigations, and then I had a Q9, and the Q9 is traffic accident investigator and stuff like that. But they're just subcategories of the MOS itself. And there's probably, I knew, like if you're a 63 series, a wheel mechanic, I mean, there's all kinds of MOSs on different vehicles, whether it's 5-ton, that's your specialty, diesel engines, on and on and on. So there's quite a few. I listed a whole bunch of them, but I'm not going to read all those off. That's crazy. But I would say off the get-go, if one of your kids or you are going into the military, the first thing the recruiter is going to do is try to push you in those ones that are low density, that the military says, we got to fill these. And they'll do everything they can to push you into MOSs you don't want to go into. And then they'll start teasing you with bonuses and stuff like that. And I think right now they said they're giving out on certain MOSs in the Army a $50,000 sign-on bonus for it once you complete the school. And then you'll get 50% of it when you complete your school. And then over the life of whatever enlistment you did, 4 years or whatever, they'll give you so much each month inside your paycheck till they get it paid off. So,
that was an interesting concept that you didn't see a lot in the Marine Corps. There was only a certain that I knew of guys that were coming in, and they were like certain very specialty MOSs that were, you had to score high on the ASVAB, you had to be able to pass the school, those types of things. They would offer a sign-on bonus.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was like, sign on what? Never heard of it. And
infantry's not one of them.
No, gosh, no. You all you get is a hard time going over there. I did see Mickey Critter Creek came in.
Oh, did he?
He did right here. He says, MOS, I was shocked. The Air Force, my recruiter tried to talk me out of law enforcement. I wanted to be a dog handler. Cool uniforms.
Yeah. I went to dog handler school at the Air Force at Lackland because I got assigned my first duty station after I left Korea. I went from Korea to Europe, and I got assigned to a dog handling detachment at a nuke site. And then I went back to the States, and I went to Lackland to go to dog school. So, yeah.
I think the Air Force, I think actually they run that whole school even for like the deployment dogs, don't they?
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know the Marines that we sent when I was with the Engineer Battalion to go be dog handlers for deployments, it was all Air Force ran.
Yeah.
And I think most of our, at least every time I was around any of the EOD, the explosive ordnance guys,
hey, Devil Dog,
they were all Air Force.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the MOSs are definitely, and then kind of like Mike was saying was, and I talked about it a little bit with my, back when we were talking about when I first joined with my recruiter, was looking at that MOS. Another factor, once again, if you're watching this thinking that, somebody in your family might be going in, is it's all about quota, and it's a timeline of when the schools go. So one of my sons that actually, he missed 4 from being perfect on the ASVAB, had him locked in to go, he was going to go Intel. And I told the recruiter right then and there, I said, you ship them as fast as you can do it. Like it's an open MOS, like send him out, let him go. But the recruiter needed the numbers, so he pushed him back like a month or two, and that was too long. And my son was like, nope, you're not sending me now. I want to go do something else.
Yeah, they close
out doing it.
They close as fast as they open.
Right. And so, and it was one of those that he just was doing it. The recruiter was doing it for his own personal numbers to keep his monthly quota lined up. And I'm like, it's my son. I'm telling you, this is not a kid you want to sit and wait on thinking he's going to be your numbers for next month, because he's not going to be there. Yeah. And then that sergeant recruiter's calling me and he's like, Steph, and I'm like, dude, I told you, like, this is your fault. Like, I've tried talking to him. I want him to still do it, but now he's living his computer tech job doing 9 to 5. He did admit, I think, one of our last conversations, that he was like, kind of wish I would have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of when I look back on it, you get done with boot camp and everything, and then we had something like we had the weekend. It ended on a Friday, and we had a pass. And then the following Monday, we went straight into the school phase at the MP school there at Fort McClellan, Alabama. And you went in there, and of course, you had basic law. You'd go through the UCMJ. You'd go in through crime scene investigation. You'd go into traffic investigation. You'd go into processing the numerous types of documents that you had to fill out, your rights warning, your waivers, all that stuff. You learned to read people their rights. You learned how to, they put you in the middle of an intersection on Fort McClellan on this white box thing, and you had to direct traffic and all that kind of stuff. They turned the light off, and you had to, and of course the guys, they're yelling at you, you're doing it wrong and all this kind of stuff. And then you had to test out of each phase and stuff like that. And they made it look so cool while we were going through there. And I mean, just like a police academy, all the paperwork and everything with the law and stuff like that, how to properly put on, handcuffs and how to double lock them, do all this stuff. And you got kind of pumped up because a lot of kids, they join the military and they go into the MP Corps because on the outside, you can't carry a gun until you're 21, can't go to the police academy. So they go into the military and do a stint there, get it into their blood, and they would get out after their enlistment and then go and find a job on the outside when they're 21. So you're 18, you're 21, that's 3 years of your life. And then most, when I came in, you only had to do 3 years. Then later on it changed because you have an 8-year commitment when you sign up for the military, and people don't know that. It's an 8-year commitment to the military. So you only have to do 4 years of active. And then when you get out, they can call you up at any time. They put you in what they call, if you don't go into like the National Guard or the reserves or something like that, you're in a thing called the Individual Ready Reserve. And you have to stay in shape. You have to go in like once a year for a physical. And they could call you up at any time. And they never got called up until Desert Storm came. I mean, and a lot of them got called up and they thought they were out. Okay. But that's not the fact. When you sign an enlistment contract, it's for 8 years now. So you have to remember that when you sign up. So, I mean, they could do things as much as, let's say you got out and you were in a low density MOS. I mean, one of those MOSs where people didn't fill. And all of a sudden they go so low in that MOS, they call you back up and you're back on active duty again to finish out your 8 years. They can do that by law because you signed the contract. And a lot of people don't know that when they go in there and sign, and the recruiters go over it so damn fast. So, oh, what?
I thought I was 4 years done. I'm growing my beard, you know, doing all the wild, crazy things, and all of a sudden they get the phone call and they're like, "Oh."
So I finished. I graduated and everything, and I enlisted for Europe. That's where I enlisted for Europe, knowing I'd go to Germany because that's where they were, either there or Italy. I was going to go because those are the Army places over there in Vicenza, Italy, or Germany. So I graduated, and all of a sudden they started handing orders out, and I didn't get a set of orders. They said, "Hey, they're waiting for you because you got to get cleared for a clearance. You can't go over your." For some reason, they said yours is on hold for a clearance. I go, "Wow, I wonder where I'm going." Oh man, dude, you must be getting some big time job or something. All of a sudden, I get my orders, and it's for the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute! I signed up for Europe." Right? I signed up for Europe, and I said, this can't be right. And I was bitching. I said, I don't want to, that's the last place I want to go. Well, I got to Korea, and I landed in Osan Air Base. And then they have a place there called the Turtle Hut where you in process. It's a building, and you just right behind the next guy, and you in process. Then they put me on a deuce and a half. And I went from Yongsan in the back of a deuce and a half. And back then in the 70s and most of the 80s, you had the PCS in your dress uniform. And it was December. It was December in Korea, and it's cold as all get out in Korea. And I was in the back of a deuce and a half with my patent leather shoes on and all this crap, because in basic, you had to spit shine them. But when you went to the PX, you went to clothing sales, the first thing you bought, so you didn't have to spit shine shoes, you bought your patent leathers, so you didn't have to shine them no more, right? And my feet were just frozen. All of a sudden, we took this long drive in a deuce and a half. And if you ever rode in a deuce and a half with the wooden seats and stuff like that, it was crazy. I took out my coat and stuff, had to put it on there because my butt was just raw. Because I was like 160 something pounds after AIT and basic training. So they took me there, and all of a sudden we got to this base. It was called Camp Casey. And that's not Camp Casey, Camp Red Cloud. We got to Camp Red Cloud. That's where the headquarters for 2nd Infantry Division was. And then I got out there, and some people from the 2nd MPs came out, and they said they started in processing me and stuff. And they said, "Oh, dude, you're going to Warrior Base." I said, "What's that?" And these guys started laughing. I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Yeah, we have a platoon up on Warrior Base, and Warrior Base is up on the DMZ, right?" And later that afternoon, I got on the deuce and a half, and they took me up there. It was like the longest 20 miles of my life. We got up there, crossed this bridge. It was covered in barbed wire and guards on the bridge and all that kind of stuff. And it was the ROK Army, Republic of Korea Army, guarding the bridges and stuff. Then we went through a checkpoint, and then all of a sudden we came up on this one place, and it was already dark because it was December. It gets dark at 5 o'clock or 4:30, and I seen these floodlights. All right. Because I was in a van at that time, and I seen all these floodlights, and I'm going, what the heck? And we went to the gate, and we had to show our ID cards and all that stuff to the MPs there. And the guy was saying, "Hey, is there any MPs in here?" And I said, "Right here." He goes, "Oh, good. You must be, Snuffy McGee's replacement," whatever the hell they said. And I go, "What?" And I got out, and it was nothing but mud where we parked, because it used to be a gravel parking lot, but they got so much rain and snow, it was just mud. And they had 2x4 sidewalks, and all you seen was these GP large tents, this dress right dress. And that's where I lived for the next year, was in a tent. This was nothing like they showed me on the videotape to be a police officer in the military. And my duties there was we were up there and we were on checkpoints all the freaking time in the middle of nowhere. And you're thinking, man, what if all of a sudden these North Koreans came across this thing? And what am I going to do out here by my damn self? You know? And then, you know, you see drunk Koreans walking home from mama songs and stuff like that. And I couldn't wait to get out of there. Could not wait to get out of there. That was the worst. I mean, I was crushed. We ate in a tent. We slept in a tent. Our orderly room was in a tent. I mean, it was just, are you kidding me? Now it's all buildings up there. But in 79, it surely wasn't. And then sometimes we had to go out there and walk from tower to tower if you were the sorry sucker that had to walk. And we're talking about when you're walking, you walk to a tower, you've done half of your 8-hour shift walking, checking fence line and doing all this stuff. And then you would eat your lunch or your dinner, whatever shift you were on. And then you would walk back doing the same thing every day for a freaking year. And that sucked. And I kept saying, I'm supposed to be in Europe. I'm supposed to be in Europe. All of a sudden my year was done and I got orders to 21st replacement in Frankfurt, Germany. And that's a whole nother story because the same thing happened to me when I went there because they seen my security clearance. And once they seen my security clearance, then they sent me to a nuke site in the middle of nowhere. And that's for another day. But I really tell you that the what I experienced was truly a schoolhouse mentality because other than all the instructors back then were military also. So unlike today, high percentage of the instructors are civilians that are teaching the military people as they're going through school and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't what I thought at the beginning. And then I started choosing, I was choosing my fight when the reenlistments came around. You know what I mean? I made sure when I was going somewhere, I picked a specific point and I told them that I ain't reenlisting. And it's and duty stations and stuff like that will come up on a later show. But the schoolhouse at McClellan was pretty dang good. I mean, because I've been to a police academy also, and it's on the same level. But most of the police academies you go to in the States for your either the sheriffs or highway patrol and stuff like that is specific to that state, that county and stuff like that. We have to learn penal codes and all that kind of stuff. We had to do the same thing once you went to a state or whatever, because both laws apply on a military installation. Except when you go to court, you got to go to a U.S. magistrate court rather than going to a local municipality or something like that to go to court. So how was your school? Because you are totally different than mine.
Yeah. So, well, we finish off like with boot camp. Now, like I was saying the other day or last week was, I went to San Diego, California, and did part of it there at Camp Pendleton. Well, then the Marine Corps breaks it up after that. So if you're a non-infantry MOS, which is pretty much anybody in the Marine Corps that is non-infantry, you're going to go to Marine Combat Training, MCT. So you graduate boot camp, well, then you get 10 days of leave. They send you out, do your 10 days of leave. And then, but when you leave, you have a plane ticket in the hand to fly back to, it's either you're going to go back to North Carolina if you were an East Coaster, or you're going back to California. So I flew back to Camp Pendleton and did 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, doing this Marine combat training. And all it is basically taking the non-infantry MOSs and giving them exposure to an infantry environment, teaching you more land nav, teaching you, how to survive, how to build a shelter, how to set up defensive positions, a lot of hiking, that kind of stuff. But it's classes about, you know, shooting all the different weapon systems. It was actually a really good time. And then we actually got my MCT class, because by the time I went back out, now it's like end of November. My graduation day was set for like the day, 1 or 2 days after Thanksgiving. And, you know, one of the major benefits of being in the military is any kind of federal holiday, you're off for 3-4 days. Well, there was no difference out there. So they actually cut us short by, I think, like 2 training days. And we got to spend Thanksgiving with military families that would come in. They did this Adopt a Marine program.
Right.
And then we came back, we graduated MCT. So from MCT, you get done there and they put you, get on the bus, go straight to the airport, and then you fly to wherever your MOS school is. For me, it happened to be in Fort Knox, Kentucky. That's where the Army armor school was at the time. It's since moved to Fort Benning. But I know we've talked about it before and early on, was the Marine Corps piggybacked off the Army when it came to tanks and the armor stuff. And there was a lot of piggyback that the Marine Corps did, because we were so broke we had to.
Yeah.
So go to Fort Knox, and I think the best part about arriving in Fort Knox was this is end of November. So I knew, living and growing up in Michigan, that it's going to be cold. It's Kentucky. 2 of my classmates that they were also in my same boot camp platoon, and then I had them in the same platoon for MCT. They were from the southern border of Texas. They were probably only 1 or 2 generations removed of you know, coming to the States. These guys left Camp Pendleton in shorts and t-shirts. And it was fine when we were on the flight. And then we got into Louisville, Kentucky at probably 2 a.m. And I just laughed, because I knew I had my jacket. I was wearing jeans. Like, I knew what we were flying into. And they had no clue. And they just look at me and they're like, what is going on? What is this? And I was like, it's cold. It's wintertime. Like, and they had no clue. And so we got to Fort Knox, and now all of our instructors were Marine instructors. It was all enlisted from the MOS. And up until I even retired, and the Marine Corps has now gotten rid of tanks, so my MOS doesn't even exist. But it was still all Marines running it. The only civilian kind of control we had was all the civilians, because the Army had switched over to a lot of their curriculum developers, range personnel, all that kind of stuff were all civilians. So you still had to go through that aspect. But then you go through MOS school, and MOS school there, being at Fort Knox, well, the closest thing to go do anything, because how more rude to put a military installation in a dry county?
Yes.
Like, and I'm like, what? I thought this was like ancient times. I didn't think dry counties were a thing anymore. But it
still are.
Right. Well, and they still are here in Arkansas. Like, luckily where I'm at, it's not. But like where everybody lives on the west side, you know, SLR, CRC, David, come on, they're all in a dry county.
Yeah.
So, and Anson and Gladys, they're dry county. So, yeah, what we ended up doing was, you're pretty much strict, almost boot camp style. So, you know, you go from boot camp where they're telling you what to do every second of the day. You go to MCT and the instructors are more relaxed, but they're still, you're doing everything every day. You don't have any, you know, leave time. You're not getting weekends off. You're not doing any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So getting to MOS school is a really big transition. And of course, I found out more because when I retired, I was at the Schoolhouse. I retired from the Schoolhouse, but that's a huge transition because now you get weekends off. I mean, unless you messed up or there's a training event, You do your class Monday through Friday, and then we always had a formation the following morning. It didn't matter Saturday and Sunday. They would push the morning formation back on the weekends, but you had a morning and an evening formation to make sure everybody that went out on Libo and did that kind of thing, because we all would pitch in, call the cab company, tell them send us a van, and we would catch a cab and go to Louisville, and then spend our Friday, Saturday running around Louisville to the little party areas and bars, and because there was nothing to do around Fort Knox itself.
Right.
And we were actually still allowed at that time, and my graduating class from MOS school was the last graduating class that was allowed to have your personal vehicles at the schoolhouse.
Oh, really?
So we ended up getting a couple of the guys that lived up in like Indiana, or I know there's one guy was from South Carolina. He ended up one of our first Libo chances. He went home, got approved to go home long enough to like pick up their vehicle and come back.
Right.
But mind you, it was November. I got there the end of November, and I didn't leave Fort Knox till, what was it, May? Sometime in May, I think. So it was all winter long, and it was very structured. We got up and would PT every morning, and you have road crossings, right? You're running on all the roads, but there's also traffic, not like highway traffic, but traffic driving around the base and the installation. And I remember, you're up at 05, so you can be PTing by 5:30. And all of a sudden, our headlights, there would be 2 road guards up in front carrying flashlights. Nobody else had flashlights except for the 2 guys, the taillights in the rear.
Yeah.
You'd come around a corner on a road, and it's dark, so the ground is there because your feet are hitting it, but you can't see it. And all of a sudden, you see the headlights doing this number all over the place because they just hit ice.
Yeah.
And then the whole front of the formation disappears, and you're spread everywhere because you hit the ice and you're at a full run. You're not stopping. You're going down. And they tried to modify some of the PT on the really icy days, but it made it a challenge. But it was kind of a first taste of transitioning before you went to your first duty station, because, like I said, they allowed you to go out on the weekends, and you still had to hey, there's David Moffett. I know everyone's been looking for him tonight.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where I was going with that, but first taste of freedom since boot camp, other than that 10 days. And then when you're done with MOS school, and that's where I had found out, well, I knew once I got to MOS school to start talking to them, was where I thought I was going to get to travel. Like my uncle, the reason I joined the Marine Corps, went to Okinawa, went all over the place. I had two duty stations. I could go to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, which I'd seen Troy, Adventure America, spent some time in New River. It's all same place, same town.
Yeah.
The opposite side of town. Or 29 Palms, California.
What a shithole. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm Army. And the first time in my life, we railhead everything from Fort Polk, Louisiana, out there. We flew a bunch of wheeled vehicles just to get, they set it up. My M151 Jeep and some other ones, we flew into Norton Air Force Base. It's not there no more, but Norton Air Force Base. And then we had to drive out to the National Training Center, NTC. Well, the railhead was at 29 Palms. And I'm going to tell you, I've seen those Marines out there. I thought it was like the dawn of the dead. They're just walking around going, oh, you poor bastards. And this is like, I don't know if they lived in warehouses what, because everything was like a warehouse thing. And they said, welcome to 29 Palms. The guy at the gate when we drove in. And I'm just like going, he really didn't mean that. He did not mean that. Right. And then we had to drive across the desert. It was all powdered dust sand for the next, what is it, like 17 miles or 20 miles across the desert to get to the National Training Center. Oh, man, that's the only time I've ever felt bad for a Marine, because you getting stationed there. And Dawn said it too. I mean, she said it was the butthole of the Marine Corps.
Oh, it is. And it's the only Marine Corps installation that you can do combined joint exercise of all the elements of, like the Marine Corps Fighting Force.
Yeah.
So you can have the air wing there flying the birds and firing live fire while the infantry is on the ground. Like, you can do a full-on simulated assault attack out there. So training wise, it was a really good, which the first time I went out there, it didn't make any sense. Why do we go to the desert? Because for the whole, up until 2001, obviously, all of our training was still based Vietnam jungle warfare training, but yeah, you would still have to go out. They called them a CAX, a combined arms exercise, in 29 Palms, because that was the only place that you could have infantry, tanks, and like every element of the Marine Corps could be out in their line and element and do a simulated attack on a spot. But yeah, there was nothing out there. So when I talked to a couple of the instructors, and I'm, because I'm like, the two choices, I mean, it's California. Like, I'd already spent some time out there, but I'm like, what's 29 Palms? They're like, it's nothing but desert. I'm like, I'm out. Like, all right. Yeah. They gave you a choice when you were in the class, where do you want to go? Obviously, we all know, or at least we know, that that's a very flexible choice. Like, you can say, hey, I want to go here, but if they need you somewhere else, you're going to go there. And
wait, that wasn't on my list.
Yeah. And so, in us, there was two choices, and I'm like, oh man, I really messed up now. And
yeah,
so my first duty station, and I spent, I think, the first 6.5 years was at Camp Lejeune. Like, out of my 17 years, I had 12.5 years were at Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
Because the only other option was 29 Palms. And I did do 2 years. I was stationed out there, and I'll say the saving grace of being the units at 29 Palms, to be part of those units compared to like being part of first tanks, vice second tanks, night and day difference.
Yeah.
I loved first tanks, and I loved that unit. Everybody that I worked for out there and worked with was amazing. Night and day difference from being on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But there was nothing, and my saving grace was, like, I was married, had 4 kids, and the base itself, because they know it's an armpit and there's nothing to do, they put on a lot of events for the families.
Yeah.
We get free concerts, all kinds of stuff. So,
yeah. Right.
But yeah, so I left from there, and I went. We actually got leave again, I think, right after MOS school. You got like 10 days of leave as part of your order transition. So my stepdad had actually drove down from Indiana and picked me up, and then we drove back home, and I stayed there for the 10 days. And in that time, I bought a car, and we convoyed, me and 2 other of my classmates that were from like central and southern Indiana. I tagged along with them, and they followed me the rest of the way to North Carolina. So we had our cars. But
so in your MOS, was all of your MOS done at Fort Knox?
Yeah, for the basic MOS, it was all done at Fort Knox.
Yeah. A lot of people, I hire in my career now, working for the government, I hire a lot of people. And a lot of these people are young kids and stuff like that for entry-level jobs and things and stuff like that. And I go there and I get their resume and I go, oh, this person's applying for a certain job, and their resume is one page. It might be a half a page. And they tell me everything they did while they were in school, which doesn't help you at all, really. I graduated so I can read and write, and I know basic math or whatever. So a lot of reason that kids come into the military. Number one, they come from a poor family, number one. Number two, they didn't do well in school, but they do well enough to get into the infantry or whatever MOS they could get into. And they had no plans. They weren't smart enough to go to college. They didn't get no college wrote them back, said, hey, you graduated 897 in your class, and we'd like to give you welcome to Duke University. That was never going to happen for me. I was born south of the tracks, poor family, I didn't have no clue what I was going to do day two after I got out of high school. Nothing, no plans. And I will tell you that a lot of my guys that I hire or gals that I hire, because they understand how the government runs after a tour in the military, they apply for government jobs because, they go back home after getting out of the military. And somebody told me, if you take a 1/50,000 map, a regular tactical map, and wherever your house is, you put a $50 on that map, that's your job opportunity right there. Right? And you go back home and half your class is in jail or they've moved away and there's nobody there. What am I doing? I'm running a register at the 7-Eleven or whatever, and I'm still getting by just like I did before. But gosh dang it, I was a Marine. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm working in a plant where I put a rod in a lawnmower every day. Okay, here we go. And you just become a zombie and stuff like that. And I get it because when I got out, after I got shot and everything, I went to work for my brother-in-law, and my job after being in a staff sergeant in the Army was to paint red iron. That's all I did all day long. Or if it was something special, he'd give me a cutting list and I would cut metal because he owned a steel company. That's all I did. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck, man? I used to be in charge of soldiers getting ready for combat, and I'm sitting out here in the Arizona sun painting steel with red paint. I'm going, yeah, this isn't for me. So I mean, they told me when I got out on medical retirement that you're going out because you'll never run again, yada, 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 so on and so forth. I put the pedal to the metal, and I started conditioning like no time in the military. And I worked myself up to, because the VA was paying for, all the therapists and physical therapy and all this kind of stuff. And I was out it was 9 months, so almost 10 months. And I went back to the recruiter. I said, I can't stand this civilian. This is nuts balls. I can't do this stuff. You know what? And I went back in there and I took a PT test, and I scored I think I scored a 285 on the P test out of 300. 2-mile run, push-ups, setups, that kind of stuff. Then they put me, I had to go to a specialist and all that stuff. And they let me back in. And people were saying, dude, they're giving you this money for free. Why are you going back in? I said, I can't live like this. Yeah. My brain at 18 years old was formed by the military, and I went back in. But when I went back in, so I figure the first 10 years I was a military police officer. And when I went back to the recruiters, they said, your prior service. The only thing we have open for prior service is NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical specialist. And I said, well, there's got to be something. He goes, take it or leave it. We don't need you. And I'm going like this. This is an Army guy telling me this. I wanted to come over to the desk and put my fist down his throat. And so I took it. So I had to go back to Fort McClellan, Alabama, because the MP school's there and the chemical school's there. And the chemical and the MPs did not get along. I mean, when we were on Liberty, it was a fight every weekend. And so I went back there and I learned skills that, I mean, you have to be smart. And I put everything I could into it. I graduated. I was in the top 1% of my class. And then what I found was an NBC guy can go to any MOS company in the Army because they're everywhere.
Right.
And that's where I learned the most about the other MOSs, aviation, engineers. I mean, I went to Bosnia with the engineers, and that was before I made first sergeant, and I was an E7, and we're getting ready to deploy to Bosnia, and they made me the first sergeant in an engineer battalion in the headquarters company going to Bosnia on a deployment. Man, those other engineers were pissed that the sergeant major and the colonel chose me to run that company when we went over there. And then I did that, and then all of a sudden and I was an E7, and I was acting first sergeant. And then we were over there like 6 months, and then an E8 came in, an actual first sergeant. He came in and took over, and I went over to the headquarters, the battalion headquarters at Camp Lisa. And I'm saying that because the experiences and the education that you get never end in the military. Okay. It never ends. I mean, I go over there, and I never thought in a million years, they said, hey, Sergeant Elmer, you need to go with the jump tack. We want you to be in charge of the jump tack, and you're going to a town called Srebrenica in Bosnia. I said, wow. I mean, I heard the name. I wasn't putting two and two together, and we parked there, and then all these UN vehicles and NATO vehicles and UNICEF and all these people showed up there. And then a horizontal vertical company of engineers came in with backhoes and all that. And I stayed there for another 3 months as we dug up the mass graves in Bosnia. And something about, I guess for the first few days, I threw up and I threw up and I threw up. And I got to work with all these forensic scientists, and I mean, all these tables as they're pulling these, bones. It was just like body soup in a trench that they shot them in the back of the heads. Their bones were still wired with barbed wire behind their backs and stuff like that. And I learned everything I could from these forensic scientists, what they were doing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, I never thought in a million years, number one, a human being could do this to another human being, but I never thought I would be in that situation. When I joined the military, I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and it was just, you learn so much. And I know how to put up, a triple-double bridge now. I watched every step of it. I was out there with them, roasting nuts and bolts as they're putting the bridge and pushing it across the gorge and stuff like that, so we could have roads, because they blew up every bridge and everything like that. I didn't know that I was going to learn anything about demo. I mean, when we landed on the Sava River and we crossed that on the floating bridge from the bridge company, and there's boats on every part of the bridge on this massive river, and all these trucks are going into Bosnia, and we were first ones in there, and we had to clear Route Arizona, and I knew nothing about demo. Well, guess what? I got a crash course on demo, and we used 2 basic loads to clear the road all the way to Sarajevo in Bosnia, southern Bosnia, just blowing up landmines and stuff like that. Getting to shoot a 50 cal sniper rifle, blowing up landmines that you could see as we're going down. I mean, all those things that you learn. And I look at that and I go, a kid coming for a job out of high school, and he's got like one thing, and it's usually a made up job, or they worked at Casey's, or they worked at some place, while they were in high school and stuff. And then I see a guy that comes in looking for a job, and he's retired military, or he was in the military, and he has got this resume that I can relate to, knowing that this guy is going to give me everything he can every single day. Are there slugs that come in that were in the military? Sure, there is. Are they opinionated? Yes, we are. We are very opinionated people after you come out of the military, because I've had pure civilian bosses that they say, "Sir, you are so opinionated." I said, "Really? You want to hear my story? This is why I'm opinionated." Okay. When you're given the responsibility to tell somebody else to put their own life in their hands to go from point A to point B in a combat zone, yeah, those are decisions that a person's got to make. And we said on the other thing, leaders are made. People go, "Oh, you're a born leader." There's no such thing, because you coming out of high school, you couldn't lead yourself out of wet paper bag, as I've said before. All right. They make you who you are. The people who can't cut it, get chaptered out. Okay. Or they get released from their commitment because they just mentally cannot handle the stress that comes with all this stuff. But when we're talking about MOSs, the military has a very clear step-by-step method of training people. And you may go through the same training so you can test out 3 times. As they say, if you hear something or see something 3 times being done, you should know it. If you can't, then you need to go somewhere else where you don't have to think as much. So I truly believe that kids that go into the military, especially the way I see things in the world, and I try to keep a very open mind, because my employees are like 18-year-olds to 60-year-olds. And it is just, I don't have the time to make them patriots. But going into the military was probably, and number one, to learn a skill. Okay. I mean, chasing girls or chasing boys and playing sports is not a skill that you can take into your adult life. You can reminisce all you want, like Bundy did in Married with Children, from Polk High School. You can live that life all you want, and your kids can keep living that life, and you could be a shoe salesman, but why wouldn't you want something more? So my opinion or my advice was, if you have kids, if you have grandkids, and they want to go into the military, make sure somebody's with them at the recruiter station. Not like when I went, not like when you went. Have somebody there that can help them. If you've got a relative that was in the military that knows it, give them the advice before they make a decision. Remember, I tell people this all the time. There's not a whole lot of jobs when you get out after 20 years or whatever for an infantryman in the civilian sector. They don't look for those, okay? They don't look for, how many tank mechanics do you know are on the outside? So pick those MOSs that you can go from military to civilian life, as soon as you take off the suit and put on a civilian suit, that you can cross that line and go straight to work the next day. That's just me. That's my opinion.
No, and I totally agree with you on that. As I've met people, over the years after I joined, and they would ask, once they knew, oh, you're a Marine, hey, what should I do? Or, what's your recommendation? And really for me, it didn't matter what branch they were going in. I was like, serving anyone that's going to fit you. Like, every branch has that certain criteria of people that you're going to fit here, but you're not going to fit here.
Right.
And going in to have, and I think in the long run, even though I really wasn't thinking about my future outside of the Marine Corps,
right,
when I sat down and had that conversation with my recruiter about what MOS category was I going to go into, I was just, hey, I love turning wrenches. I want to be a mechanic. And if the Marine Corps doesn't work out, then, I can always fall back on those mechanic skills and what went in there. And, because you're not going to find a company, like you said, that I can't come out. I mean, granted, I probably could go get a job with General Dynamics, but it's a government run company. Right. But, we don't have civilian tanks running around that I can just open up a Jiffy Lube and be working on tanks all day long. Right. You have to go into a government contracted job to do that. But with a lot of the skills that were learned within fixing that tank was I can go work and fix tractors. I can go fix airplanes because it's the same engine. There was different things. So getting a useful skill, and that's what I didn't understand, which part of me knows, obviously, through the deployments, that infantry are mandatory. You need them.
Yes.
But
that's a survival
training. And but if you have a choice to go in something, now if infantry is your choice, and I know guys that it was their choice.
Yeah.
But if you had a choice, like, make sure you lock in an MOS that you're going to get a some sort of skill when you get out, because with you talking earlier with the resume things, right? The biggest thing, and it brought back so many like memories and emotions of as my retirement date got closer. One of the biggest fears was not how good or bad my resume was going to look, was the monotony of going to a regular 9-to-5 factory job where you're doing the same thing. Like, I don't know how I would have been able to handle standing in a machine, stamp pressing, or, even sitting at a computer all day long, going in, doing the same thing, looking at the same amount of, computer files and changing, like, the monotony of it. And I think that that's the advantage that we gained by joining, was no matter what, even with me only having 2 duty stations, within my MOS, there was still a lot of different jobs that I went and did. And then, of course, with promotion, kind of like you talked about, well, hey, they made me the first sergeant. Well, Marine Corps, the first sergeant, that's an admin job anyways.
Yeah.
So every one of the, like,
you're in charge of beans and bullets.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, and that was something that I looked at, as I was, where I thought that being a senior staff NCO was going to be an option, was which route do you go? Do you go the maintenance side and stay there, or do you go to the admin side? Because, like, when you went to the admin side, you could go to any unit possible. And then it opens up, because when you go to that unit, you're there to do that job and take care of those personnel. But just like you talked about, didn't know anything about ordnance and doing, or, demolition. but you learned, you
Yes.
had to participate, you had to learn that. And I think that that's the advantage that the military gives anybody that goes in, even if you're only doing 4 years. You didn't go in and just, punch a clock every day and do the exact same job for all 4 years.
Yeah.
You went places, you dealt with people, and I think that's a big aspect in today's world was, and that was a bit of a shock. I mean, for me getting out when I retired and realizing that I can't talk to civilians the same way that I talk to my Marines.
Yeah.
Like they can't.
Big transition for me. Huge transition for me. Lord have mercy, it was big.
Yeah, and that was hard. And I do want to go back. And Lila, I'd seen your question. I popped it up there. I didn't suffer any like major injuries, and that like I've got injuries, but it's wear and tear injuries. But yeah, it was, and I think that's
Lila,
going back to.
I'll have to raise my hand, Lila.
Yeah, and I came really close to going to jump school because it was at Fort Benning, and I was there for
Yeah,
my
we had
last.
Marines in our jump school.
Yeah, and because it was all combined. Like I said,
Yeah.
I found out a lot more being at the schoolhouse at Benning, of that whole joint service thing. Was the Marines always typically had a detachment.
Yes.
Kind of like when you went to MP school, because our son, who's a Marine, his recruiter hosed him, so he ended up being a reservist. But he went there. He was at Fort Lost in the Woods for MP school, and so it was one of those that, but you gain a skill by going in, and I think one of the more important skills is people skills. But then you have that experience of dealing with, because man, you talk about when you have that young generation, they come in, if you remember, boot camp was the first time I had a legitimate bank account. I'd never had one.
Yeah.
But I had money before. It was just always cash. So I understood how to spend it, what not to spend it on, that kind of thing. But I watched it as I progressed. There was so many of these kids that they came from that underprivileged, that poor home. We had one kid that I remember, he ended up being raised by his grandparents.
Yeah.
And he went to school, but he also worked, a part-time job. But he had no sense of money. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like a bank account, your checkbook? Like, because he would come up and he's like, Staff Sergeant, I don't have any money. Like, what's going on with my bank account? And this kid literally spent all of his money, his paycheck, in ATM fees by checking the balance.
Yeah.
He would go every day to check his balance, and he would do it a couple times a day.
Yeah.
Just do a balance check. Well, that's charging you $1 to $2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you had a job before you came in. Like, what? How? Well, he would bring his check home. His grandparents would take the check, put it in the bank, and then if he needed money for something, they would just give him some money. Like, he never had to manage any of that. And now that I was blown away about like kids that came in and didn't even have a driver's license.
Right.
And it's like, so we came up, like we ran into a dilemma, was we wanted to send a kid to Humvee school. Well, it's a military tactical vehicle.
Yeah.
And it didn't require a civilian driver's license.
Right.
But then they're like, well, they're doing the training. They're driving on the public roads for part of the training. And so there was a big back and forth, and it did end up coming out that they were required to have for those because they could ride on the public highway.
Right.
Well, we could send guys through like tank school, and they would get their tank operator's license and never have a driver's license.
No.
But you're never going to see, well, unless you're on the military base and we're doing operations, like you never seen a tank running down, I-40. Like that wasn't a thing. So, but boy, that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you look back, and I will just say that my first 4 years was the most painful growing experience of my entire life. The change from a couch surfer from at all my friends' house to sleeping in a gas station because I couldn't live at home and all this stuff. I will tell you that something changed in me when I got to the reenlistment. When I got to the reenlistment, it was either stay or go home. So I called back home, and a buddy of mine named Bob, I talked to him and I said, "Hey, where's everybody at? What are people doing?" And he said, "Leon's in prison, and Jose's in prison, and he's gotten a car wreck and he died, and all this stuff, and they moved out of state and they moved here." And he goes, "Man," he goes, "there's nobody here." I said, "Well, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm still working at my dad's place as a welder, building horse trailers here in Arizona." But he goes, "Nothing's changed. I've been doing this, since high school, blah, blah, blah." And I'm just like going, I don't want to go home, to the same old. And it's worse than because I was in high school. Everybody was gone. They were married. They were out doing their thing. They went to college. They're successful. And so I reenlisted. When I reenlisted, my first sergeant at that time was John Police. He was the military police company first sergeant. His last name was Police, just like the military police. And he set me down and he said, "I'm going to tell you something that you may not want to hear. You are a total effed up. Okay. You've had 3 Article 15s in 4 years." He goes, "There's people that haven't had one in 20 years, but you managed to do it in 3 years. You were the longest and oldest time and grade private in the Army. And that's not something you want to go to Guinness World Record book."
No.
Right? He goes, "You are broke poor." Okay. And he goes, "And I don't think you should reenlist." Right. And so I took that and I was thinking, and I talked to the guy there, the recruiter, because each unit has a reenlistment NCO. And I had to go meet him and make a decision on Monday. And I got talked to on a Friday. And I'm going, man, what am I going to do? I mean, I couldn't sleep. Yeah. This was like the biggest. Do I want more of the same? Do I want to change my attitude? Do I don't want to work, wait for payday on the 15th and on the 30th of the month and go downtown for one night and broke and can't even pay for a cab to come home because you're chasing, wine, whiskey, and women, blah, blah, blah. I was young.
Right.
I mean, that's what I was doing. I was just wasting, because when you're poor and you get money, you don't know how to handle money.
No.
Okay. You don't. And as a first sergeant, not only are you in charge of beans and bullets, but it's like you've got 250 kids and all of them got problems. And your job, the commander gives you the job, take care of your soldiers. Take care of your soldiers. Can't balance a checkbook. Why are you overdrafting all your money? Well, we still had checks in the checkbook. We thought we still had money. No, you have no money when it says 0 on your bank account. Not just because you have checks in a checkbook. Okay. It doesn't work that way. So I made that decision. And I thank myself all the time for making it, because it was the smartest move that I ever made in my life. And it was probably the most taxing one on my brain to say, am I going to make this, do another 4 years? And then when I got shot, because I was working drug team in Frankfurt, Germany, my partner was a police officer, German police officer. They call them creepo agents. They're drug agents. And we were going to go make a buy because that was my partner. And that's where I learned most of my German, not from my German wife at the time, because I had to survive out on the streets for 4 to 6 to 9 months at a time with my partner. And we got set up and bullets were flying. I woke up and I was in 97 General Hospital and they were trying to put my leg together and all that stuff. That's how I got retired out of the military at that point in my career. So I was just, but when I left the military, 2 times when I left the military, it was like, and I say this with honesty, it was like the worst breakup of my entire life. There was something missing so hard in my chest. And seeing how, the 9 to 5 every day and doing the same job and you have no responsibilities whatsoever, except to that paint gun and that metal cutting saw. Those were your soldiers. And it bothered me that it motivated me to the point where I just lived off my disability. My wife at a time, she went to work at Hilton Hotels as a house cleaner, a room cleaner or maid. And we were just getting by and we were broke. And it felt like when I was a private again. And it motivated me to the point where I did everything that I could to get the love of my life back, if you will.
Yeah.
And then my career after I got back in just went soaring. I mean, absolutely soaring. And the promotions came real quick because I finally had my head on straight. This is where I need to be. This is where I need to be with these soldiers to help these soldiers, help them through the times that I lived through, the struggling part of making this your career and stuff like that. And I found purpose. And
that right there is the biggest thing.
It was purpose.
Yep.
My life had purpose when I committed to the relationship. And I'm going to tell you something, with regular relationships, with your career, whatever, when you find your purpose, it makes the job more enjoyable and you build a relationship with that. And, we talked about before people saying, thank you for your service. I'm going to tell you something. I am the biggest violator of receiving thanks. But I am the biggest advocate of giving thanks. Because when you see these old guys out there at the Walmarts or at the restaurants or wherever you see them, and you just step up to them and you I reach for their hands and I give them a firm handshake and I look them dead in the eye and they just go like this. And in fact, we were at the Walmart the other day and this guy just goes, I walked up to him, he's sitting on the little bench and I said, thank you for your service. And he just looked at me. He just looked at me and I seen in his eyes, he just goes, thank you and God bless you. He didn't know I was a prior service, and right. I didn't want him to know because for me, that was his moment between him and I. And that's what I want. That's why I always encourage people to thank a vet because that helps them relive. And if they have enough pride at 90 years old to put on their, jacket that they got in Korea or wherever they were, and they wear their hat and stuff like that, it still means something to them, or else they wouldn't be wearing it. Right. It really means something to them. So that's what I want everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's, it took me a little while to really, I've said it before, but when I joined the Marine Corps, that was my goal from middle school. And I never looked beyond it because I didn't know what that, I was young. I mean, 17 when I joined. To think about 20 years, like I don't even know what I'm doing 20 minutes from now, let alone 20 years from now.
Whatever Tara tells you to do.
Yeah, I mean, now it's easy. She just cracks the whip and I get her done. But it's, you lose that purpose. And when I first retired, like Tara and I weren't together. Like we didn't get together until after I had already been out for a few years.
Yeah.
And the wife I was with when I retired, we were just going totally different opposite ways.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, like, what does my life look like out of the Marine Corps? Like, I don't know what that looks like. I've never even thought about it.
Yeah.
Because just being in, even if it was in a job that was horrible, was you woke up that day knowing you had a purpose. You're serving, your country, your Marines, your service members, your brothers and sisters in arms. You have a purpose.
Yes.
Even when you don't think you do, because you still have that uniform that you're putting on every single day.
Yeah.
And you almost, like, I found myself when I look back now that, you take advantage of it, or take it for advantage, not advantage of it. You take it for granted while you're in, because you're just like, whatever, it's a normal 9 to 5. Like, except for I get to do cool stuff, every once in a while. And every day is a little bit different, because like I was saying earlier, my biggest fear is monotony.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like, I've got to change it up. And then that's what I love, when Tara and I finally got together and she talked about travel and tried to, because that was a struggle even when I was in, was sometimes that change is literally a duty station change. Well, I only had 2 to go from. What am I just going to ping pong back and forth? And even the times that I tried to get even outside the MOS, not really moving to a different MOS, but just doing another billet or duty, I couldn't get into it. And, so it was like, I spent that first 6.5 years at Camp Lejeune, and I had to leave because it was getting monotonous. Like, even though I had changed different companies and done stuff, I'm like, I've got to get out of here. And I just gotten back from Iraq, and I'm like, I survived the desert of Iraq. I could do 29 Palms. They're not shooting at me over there, so we're good. And, and I would have done longer in 29 Palms, but I had a son with a medical condition, and Headquarters Marine Corps did their, guess what? We're realigning things, and now you're going back to North Carolina. I'm like, but I'm not done here. Like, and, but even through all, like, I look back at all the, even if it's the hard times, it was still great because I knew, like, I'm waking up with my, brothers, sisters. I have a purpose. And when you get out, or if you've never, like, and I think that's maybe where some of the people that never join and they're doing that. Cause I'll tell you right now, I'm not that guy that's a factory worker. Like, wasn't going to happen. I'll find a way to jump from different McDonald's stores or something before I'm, but luckily I was blessed with kind of some certain things happened in life after I retired. Got rid of a deadbeat wife and was able to kind of find myself a little bit and figure out, because I didn't know where it was going to go. And then Tara and I getting together has been the biggest blessing ever. Because now we're living our dream, something that she had started, that we worked on it and kind of, put all the finished details. And now, I wake up every day to go do, and it's always something different. That's the great part about it is, there are typically living this homestead lifestyle that we live now. There's no 2 days the same. Not most days. I mean, some can be, you know, but if we get bored with it, then we'll go to another one. Like, it's awesome, but it's also rewarding because doing this, because the Marine Corps is not an option for me anymore, but homesteading and supporting my wife and I, and, you know, if we've got 2 children that move to the property with us, and if, you know, out of 2 of us, we have 7 kids.
Yeah.
And you know, so like to eventually maybe get some of them to migrate here this is my purpose, though, you know, providing food for, you know, me and my wife. You know, that's my main focus now is, can we have food? Can we have shelter? Can we have this? And it's giving that purpose back to life, because I think that's the hardest struggle. When you start talking to vets that are struggling when they get out, and they'll give you specific things. Well, this is what I'm having problems with. But what I've found with the vets that I've talked to is it all comes down to they don't have a point and purpose in life. Like, they're like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I go to this job, I'm miserable. I can't talk to these people because they keep writing me up for, you know, calling them weak and making them do their job and holding them accountable, you know, as to where in the military, there's always a way to hold somebody accountable to do their job.
Sure.
And, you know, so it's
definitely. Hey, I just looked at it. We're probably 36 minutes over our hour, but
see what happened was,
like I said before, I ain't putting a timeline on this, but there's a lot of people that are going to bed. Hey guys, next week we're laying it all on the line. And we're talking about the VA. The VA is in our scopes next week. I hope you guys can join us. If you've got experience with the VA, we want to hear those comments in the comment section. We're going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the VA, because they own all 3 of those words. Okay. Hey, brother, always good to spend Tuesday with you.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this all day. Been sitting just itching.
But hey, guys, I hope you guys come in here next week. Tell a friend. Share us out on your community tabs if you've got one. Put us on your Facebook, whatever you can do, so we can get more vets in here, so we can continue this conversation and keep this channel going. We absolutely love you guys. Remember, always think of vet. Go out of your way. Bust through the ladies department to get to that vet to shake his hand. I don't care what you do. They deserve every bit of our gratitude every single day to live in this country. And guys, we love you. God bless you. And we'll see you next Tuesday. I hope you guys are in here with us. Hey, there's TNT Adventures. All right. There she is, Tracy. All right. Any closing words from you, brother?
Just bring more with you next week, guys. We're loving this and we appreciate you. So thank you.
All right, guys. Hey, we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming in.
Bye now.
All right.